Yeah, this is probably the southern area of the complex. Here's the sides of this big building. Again, it looks like it was designed maybe for defense, but those windows giving a strange upward and a horizontally wide field of fire. So maybe they're just for light. And here, a tower. Okay, this is interesting because it looks like from there that was the elevation of whatever that space over there was, and maybe that was all filled in with dirt. But then underneath that was an arch that had been built, which covered a walkway and then some stairs going down into some cavity further in. So this may be a stairwell. And here, what looks to be perhaps a tower. Whether it went high or not, I can't tell, but I'm guessing that that was for a cannon. And of course it would give it a view of this entryway from the Adriatic Sea into this area, although from the looks of those islands it's pretty shallow. So this whole area here may have had cannon, or at least this whole wall along here. And again, what this was, whether it was a pot for holding water, maybe that's what they meant by cistern or not, I don't know. Nor do I know what that underneath it was, that round stone. I doubt they're pressing oil up here. But a considerable investment, I would think, in energy to make that wheel shape. Now looking at the angle of these windows, notice that's coming out at a considerable oblique from the wall. This was a defensive position of some sort. Now you would think, since it's inside those castle walls, that it had anticipated that the enemy had already protruded this far. This is interesting. I don't know what it was for. Maybe not have been placed here originally. That key shape with a hole there allowing something to move, water to move about, I guess. Who knows what that's for, but it's interesting. I have no idea how old or original, if in fact it is original, are these doors. Now it's possible from these holes that somehow this was either for firing, for air ventilation. Don't have a clue. Now all those bars over it suggest another story. Maybe it had some prison function, or at least a warehouse function. And again, if my earlier education at Kruja was relevant, these were siege balls, or balls thrown by a catapult from outside. Imagine the size, that's pretty big. You would think they could eventually begin to do some damage to a wall. Okay, you can see I'm moving down this wall, but saw this opening. Thought it might be fun to see what the inside rooms might look like. Well, not very nice, but anyway, it gives us an idea. Arched. So probably that other arch we saw is an entrance to a room there for air to get out of. Here, a round tower looking still further down the wall. I'm standing on kind of a balcony, if you will. It's interesting that the roofs were covered with this kind of slate material. Here, probably, these walls rose much higher. Who knows what those little niches for there. This room just a roost for the pet pigeons of the fort. I wonder if all of the floors or all of the tops of the buildings or all of the exposed platforms were paved in these stones. It isn't hard to imagine that this probably held several thousand people. And while we're looking at what look like nice grassy areas, we're probably almost completely filled up with structures of some sort. It's always curious to me to see little things like this, anomalies, a couple little rooms just attached to this section of buildings. Well, there's water down there. You can see it reflecting and you can hear noise down there. Now, how they got water into this cavity down below, and perhaps they created a cavity and a drainage system to fill those. Notice that there are 5, 3 where I'm standing and 2 more right there, which suggests that this area was particularly suited for these, whatever that means. Imagine the conversations of the different cultures that occupied this fort and looked out these windows at the various times of day that they did look out these windows. Sometimes were they searching and commenting on an opposing force coming by water, or their wives and families and girlfriends at home, of better days in the future. And here an entryway into a room underneath this relatively small little area. Again, rather than simply build a wall with infrastructure inside of it for housing men and supplies. Looks like that has an interesting design, that tower. Notice how we've got a flat face staring at us, but what looks like a rounded edge on the right. And I wonder if these walls, which are quite wide, in particular right here, would have gone higher to protect the building behind it, which looks like the major building. Magnificent view. If it did not anticipate your own death. Good-sized city of Shkodra. I wonder if this little bit of detailed stonework reflects the Venetian influence, as well as that entryway. Almost thought I could make out something carved into the lintel, but I don't think so. And you wonder whether these wall niches were for icons of some sort. A large building. Don't appear to be any holes up above for floor supports, but then some of that looks like it's a restoration. Again, as we look at these walls, notice that where we're standing once contained an arch that would have gone right over the top of us. So maybe this was, I don't know, the main point of a church, and there with the altar. I have no clue. Down there to the right of that cement building is where I climbed the path with a mother and a son who were showing me the way. They were coming up for some reason. And then there's the new road. So here you see a defensive wall, and I'll bet there was a defensive wall on top of that little ridge. It's interesting how a standard plan for any fortification, including the ones that Julius Caesar would set up in the field, included a trench in which the dirt was piled forward, like creating that kind of a ridge. So the soldiers first had to climb up that hill to where the greenery is, then go down into that trench, and then come back up in order to begin to assault the castle. And of course, then they had to break through this wall or get over the top of it, and then had to break up on top of this wall. Pretty formidable. All the time having stones, oil, arrows, who knows what rained down on them. A large, impressive fort. Presumably most of what we're looking at was completely covered with buildings. And as we look up here, you can see how, again, each one of these walls represents a successive barricade to attacking and penetrating troops. But here, of course, was some kind of a entryway, a roadway there that went up, probably through buildings that were built on what look like terraces, but are probably terraces and piles of rubble. There's a little bit of wall sticking out there. But this is a pretty formidable fort. much more so than Kruja was. Although for its size, Kruja was certainly highly defensible. I'm just going to pan down the side here so you can get a sense of what this was like. And notice that there are some stonework there, so there was some functions going on the side of this hill. What they were, I have no clue. It's interesting to compare the wide road, modern road, and the narrow, older road that you'll see in a moment again. Here, of course, the old narrow road